Hey there, Osyka Youth Group. Brother Reed here. I'm at the house again. Last time I spoke to you, I was at the glass shop. Uh, this is for Sunday morning. Normally we go through the book of Genesis. We've been going through that, but this is with Paul has really been on my heart, and so we're going to continue through the book of Acts for right now, anyway. So we finished up with Acts 24 last time. We're going to Acts 25. So I'm going to read that to you first. It says, Festus then, having arrived in the province, 3 days later went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. And the chief priests and the leading men of the Jews brought charges against Paul, and they were urging him, requesting a concession against Paul, that he might have him brought to Jerusalem, at the same time setting an ambush to kill him on the way. Festus then answered that Paul was being kept in custody at Caesarea, and that he himself was about to leave shortly. Therefore he said, Let the influential men among you go there with me, and if there is anything wrong about the man, let them prosecute him. After he had spent not more than 8 or 10 days among them, he went down to Caesarea, and on the next day he took his seat on the tribunal and ordered Paul to be brought. After Paul arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many and serious charges against him which they could not prove. While Paul said in his own defense, I have committed no offense either against the law of the Jews, or against the temple, or against Caesar. But Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, Are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me on these charges? But Paul said, I am standing before Caesar's tribunal, where I ought to be tried. I have done no wrong to the Jews, as you also very well know. If then I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything worthy of death, I do not refuse to die. But if none of those things is true of which these men accuse me, no one can hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. Then when Festus had conferred with the council, he answered, You have appealed to Caesar you shall go. Now when the several days had elapsed, King Agrippa and Bernice arrived at Caesarea and paid their respects to Festus. While they were spending many days there, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, There is a man who was left as a prisoner by Felix. And when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priest and the elders of the Jews brought charges against him, asking for a sentence of condemnation against him. I answered them that it is not the custom of the Romans to hand over any man before the accused meets his accuser face to face and has an opportunity to make his defense against the charges. So after they had assembled here, I did not delay, but on the next day took my seat on the tribunal and ordered the man to be brought before me. When the accuser stood up, they began bringing charges against him, not of such crimes I was expecting, but they simply had some points of disagreement with him about their own religion and about a dead man, Jesus, whom Paul asserted to be alive. Being at a loss how to investigate such matters, I asked whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem and there stand trial on these matters. But when Paul appealed to be held in custody for the emperor's decision, I ordered him to be kept in custody until I send him to Caesarea. Not Caesarea, to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I also would like to hear the man myself. Tomorrow, he said, you shall hear him. So on the next day, when Agrippa came together with Bernice amid great pomp, and entered the auditorium accompanied by the commanders and prominent men of the city, at the command of Festus, Paul was brought in. Festus said, King Agrippa, and all you gentlemen here present with us, you see this man about whom all the people of the Jews appealed to me both at Jerusalem and here, loudly declaring that he ought not to live any longer. But I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and since he himself appealed to the emperor, I decided to send him. Yet I have nothing definite about him to write to my lord. Therefore I have brought him before you all, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the investigation has taken place, I may have something to write. For it seems absurd to me, in sending a prisoner, not to indicate also the charges against him. Now, there's a few things I have highlighted here that I wanted to talk about. First of all, remember, Paul is very, very, very serious about his faith. He's not afraid. He said he was willing to go to Jerusalem, as I keep reminding y'all. Whenever they tried to talk him out of going, because they said he was going to be bound and beaten. That he said he was willing to even be bound and beaten and to die there. So he's very serious. We talked about integrity on Wednesday. But what we see here quite often is there's a problem between what Paul says and what the people want to hear. That sometimes happens as Christians. We say things that we're called. We just offend people. And it's not initially us, it's because of what we say about Christ. Jesus said, if they will hate you for his name's sake, because they first hated him. So if we're Christians and we're doing what we're called to do as Christians, we will be hated. You won't be liked by everybody. You will be loved by some and hated by others. That's just part of it. But we also see that these people, the Jews that have this big problem against Paul, they're not happy with. They want the law involved, but they want to take the law in their own hands, and we see that in verse 3. It says, requesting a concession against Paul that he might have him brought to Jerusalem, at the same time setting an ambush to kill him on the way. So yeah, they want to have him go to trial, or however you want to talk about that. But they want to take things in their own hand before he gets there. They want him dead, and they don't trust that they're going to get things done the way they want them done. So they're going to take law into their own hands. But Festus answered, and he said he was going to put him in custody and lead him there and pretty much protect him, is what it ended up being. Well, funny is also as you go down to verse 9, you go into 8, it says, well, Paul said in his own defense, I have committed no offense either against the law of the Jews or against the temple or against Caesar. But in verse 9 it says, but Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me on these charges? See, Festus is not really wanting to know the truth. He's kind of want to just do them a favor because of keep them happy and keep peace and keep them on his side if he needs a little a favor, scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of deal. So we see that here. But what's funny is Paul's answer. It says, but Paul said, I am standing before Caesar's tribunal, where I ought to have been tried. I have done no wrong to the Jews, as you also very well know. See, Paul knew that Festus knew that he ain't done nothing wrong. He's being accused of something he didn't do, and he knows that Festus don't believe it. Festus has said, that he goes on and talks about this. He didn't believe anything that Paul had done because of the way the Jews have always done. They accused Christ of doing all this stuff that they couldn't prove that he had done any of that. And it goes on in verse 11, it says, if then I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything worthy of death, I do not refuse to die, but if none of those things is true of which these men accuse me, no one can hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. And we talked about that Wednesday. Paul, his faith is just so strong. He trusts Christ in the face of death. He's willing to die, and not just talk about he's willing to die. He's willing to die. Some people will say that they would do all these things in a certain crowd, but the higher up the food chain, then they start to shy back from it. When it gets down to really doing it. But Paul is willing to do this, and he's serious. Another thing I want to see is it goes on down. It's in verse 18. It says, "When the accusers stood up, they began bringing charges against him, not of such crimes I was expecting, but they simply had points of disagreement with him about their own religion and about a dead man, Jesus, whom Paul asserted to be alive." They're wanting him to die because they disagree with him. I mean, think about that. And I'm going to share a little more about that in just a minute. But then it goes on that I have highlighted that I really want to touch on. It says in verse 24, it says, "Festus said, 'King Agrippa, and all you gentlemen here present with us, you see this man about whom all the people of the Jews appealed to me both at Jerusalem and here, loudly declaring that he ought not to live any longer.'" I mean, they're serious, just because they don't agree with him. It says, "But I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and since he himself appealed to the emperor, I decided to send him." Now, what I want to talk about is, we have that situation in America right now, or has been for a while, where, and here's an example. You have the homosexual group, and they go to a baker, and they want a cake made for their wedding. And the baker is a Christian, and he says, I'm not going to make a cake for your wedding. I don't believe in that, so I'm not going to do it. So instead of them just leaving and going to another baker, a non-Christian baker, no, they want to have this man put out of business because what he believes and what they believe is different. We've seen that with the bakers. We've seen that in other things where they don't, just because we disagree don't mean death. And that's pretty much what it is. Back then they were that serious. They want them put to death. Now, because this baker won't make my cake, put him out of business, give me some money, all this kind of stuff. And it's sad because, here's my deal. If I go to a restaurant or anything like that, or a gas station, if I go anywhere and I go in there and I'm not satisfied with the way I'm treated, if I'm not satisfied with their food, if I was to go somewhere and walk in and say I have a shirt on that has something Christian about it, and they don't want to serve me, and we hear about that too. We have businesses that don't want to serve the police department, anybody, military, anything like that. And then you have the other businesses that they don't want to serve the Christian side of it, or the police department. They were bad about the cop deals, and they still are in certain places. So you have two sides. You have one side that don't want to serve the Christian and the police department and anything like that, and then you have the other side that wants to be served by them, and they're willing to put people out of their business if they don't agree with them, because they don't agree with the way the police department's acting, or the way they're enforcing laws. They want to put them out of their business, not serve them. But yet they want to be served if they go somewhere else. That don't work like that, guys. It's not right. Look, if I go somewhere and I'm not satisfied, if I go somewhere and somebody asks me to leave, I'm not going to have try to have that person put out of business. We have, because here's my thing. as a business owner myself, I want to have the freedom to, if someone comes into my business, now I wouldn't stop anybody by their race, religion, anything like that. I've never been, if somebody comes in and wants glass done, I'm not gonna, because as a Christian, putting in windshields, it don't really affect. Now, what I will say is, if someone comes in using foul language, I may say, look, I'm you're gonna have to go somewhere else. And it's like, well, I want you to do my windshield. Well, you're gonna have to close your mouth and quit talking the way you're talking, and then I'll do your glass work. Now, if that person gets mad and wants me to put out of business because I don't want to hear their language, what kind of deal is that? Just go somewhere else. And that's me. If I go somewhere and I'm not treated right, I just don't go there no more. The same thing with Target. Target has been in the news for a while of opening up the restrooms. They have a policy where men can go into the ladies' restroom. Now, the Christian side of that, some of the American Family Association has been boycotting Target, and not trying to put them out of business. They just won't do business with them, and that's what I haven't been back. I wasn't really a big Target shopper anyway, but I don't go to Target anymore because of that. Now, here's the thing. There's other businesses that have the same policy. They just don't talk about it. So, but the key thing is this whole thing with Paul right now is because they don't agree with Paul. His way of life, his way of following God, all that, they don't agree with it. So instead of saying, well, look, we don't agree with you, we just don't want to hear you no more, get out of our town, get out of my house, don't come around me, But to be put to death because of what he said, and that's what Festus says. It says that when the accusers stood up, now they supposedly have this against him that is worthy of death. Okay, they have this thing that he has done so wrong that he is, they're going to put him to death. They've been trying to put him to death. It says, but when the accusers stood up, they began bringing charges against him, not of such crimes I was expecting. And Festus thought, I'm expecting him to have done some major things for them to be bringing him before me. And it's kind of like, I say something you don't agree with, so we disagree on something. And you get the law involved because we disagree on something, and the law shows up. You call the law and say, look, you need to get over here. The law shows up. They're expecting me to have done something serious for them to have to show up. Not just a disagreement, not just it hadn't come to hollering and screaming and fist fighting and all that kind of stuff, Paul beating up a bunch of people, assault, show up and all these people are beat up and they drag Paul off to jail. There's just a verbal disagreement. It hasn't caused any kind of uproar except where they did. And remember, we saw that a while back where they caused a big uproar trying to get everybody like a riot because of what Paul had said. It's crazy. This one man has the whole group of people in an uproar. One man. Does it sound like somebody else? Jesus came in to the story, and that one man had people in an uproar. One man. Think about it. Think about the people that talk on TV. Well, think about, just pick somebody that you see something on TV, or you hear somebody talking on TV and you don't agree with. What do? If you don't like listening to them, what do? You change channels. You don't say, look, man, we need to kill this dude. Now, some people are like that. It's the same people that were back then. We have that same group of people, the same mentality today. Same group of people, different generation. Back then, Paul says something they don't like, let's kill him. We have that same thing today. Our president's one. You got one side of people that says, hey man, he's doing a good job. Other side says, we need to get rid of him because of what he said. And it's crazy. And they've had death threats. And it's crazy that people would go to that extreme just because of something somebody says. Look, there's a bunch of TV shows that I don't watch because of what people say. I'm not trying to put them out of business. I'm not trying to get a group together and go beat these people up or put them in prison or anything like that. I'm just not going to listen to it. But see, that's the way Christians handle things. Now, some Christians don't. There's some Christians that go to the extreme and they want people put out of business. There's some that want Target put out of business because of their bathroom laws or bathroom rules. There's Christians that want Netflix put out of business because of some of the shows they put on there. But guys, we have to have some freedom. We have to have some freedom because, like I say, as a business owner, I want to have the right to say, go somewhere else. There's the store up there, the Chevron up there by the interstate. They used to have a sign. They've remodeled and I haven't seen the sign up there. They do have another sign, but the one I used to see behind the counter said that we have, and it used to be on a lot of businesses. On their front door of the business going in, it would have a sign and it would say, we have the right to refuse service to anyone. And we should have that right. Now, do we refuse service because of someone's race? No, that's not right. Do we refuse service because of someone's religion? No, that's not right. But if someone comes in there being hateful or being rude or anything like that, you should have the right to say, hey, you need to leave. If that right is taken away, like the bakers that were pretty much forced out of business, they had to pay fines and stuff like that because they wouldn't make the cake, then what happens? It's going to get to a point where people are going to say, look, I'm not going to have a business, because if anybody comes in there and they're not satisfied, they can get the law involved and put me out of business. It's crazy. Now that same store up there has, but what their sign used to say, it says, we have the right to refuse service to you. And then it went on, it said, no matter who you are, who you think you are, or who your mama is, we have the right to refuse service. Now they have a sign that says you can get a free ticket, a free ride in a police car if you're caught shoplifting. And it says you'll get your name in the paper and it'll make your family happy, family proud, and all this kind of stuff, But see, that's rights. We should have the right to put a sign up saying that. I have a sign on my front door that says I carry, and I want to have a right to be able to defend myself. That's why that sign's there. Because I don't want to have to defend myself and not have that sign. Because here's the thing. Here's some legal things. As a business, if you have cameras, you have to have a sign saying you have cameras, because you can be sued for recording somebody. So you have to have a sign saying this building is under surveillance, because if you have video of them and they don't know you have video of them and they steal something and you go to court and you don't have a sign and they say, well, look, I didn't know he had a sign, you can be in as much trouble as they are. So when I put up my sign about I carry, that was what my thought was. Okay, I'm gonna put a sign up, because if someone comes in and tries to rob me, and I have to use my pistol, which I would hate to do, I don't want to have to be in more trouble than them. I don't want to end up going before the judge, and the judge say, and the person that I have to use my gun on says, well, I didn't know he had a gun, uh, and then I end up being in more trouble. So I have signs. I also have a sign saying I have a security system. I also have a sign saying I have cameras, just to protect myself. And it shouldn't be that way. Shouldn't have to do that. But this same kind of thing, like I say, these same minded people in the Bible, we think it's something new. We think it's something new right now, where against the bakers and there's preachers that have gotten in trouble because they wouldn't perform a gay marriage, and all this kind of stuff, and trying to force them into doing these things. I mean, what kind of freedom is there if we can't say what we want to say because we get hushed? You can't say that, and then we can't do what we want to do. Hey, I'm not against. I'm against. Don't get me wrong. Christianity we have, but I'm not gonna force by law on anybody. But I don't want that forced on me either. I want the right to say I'm not gonna go to that place, but I don't want those people to come to my place. And we need those rights. Paul is in this situation, and he's in trouble. Is what he's done, has what he is, I'm getting all tongue tied. What he's done, is it worthy of death? No. Disagreement, they don't agree with what he says, run him out of town. They did a few chapters back, but that wasn't good enough. They followed him to the next town because they knew he went to the next town. They go there and they start trouble. Those people like that are never satisfied, as long as if they're not getting their way. If they get their way, they're happy. But guys, there's two sides to it. There's always been arguments. There's always been disagreements. That's because we're different. But just because I have an idea and it's different than yours, well, who are we going to side with? And these kind of people are saying, well, we're right, and we want to force this on you. Well, we can be on the same side. We can be on the other side saying, well, wait a minute, I think I'm right. We're still in the same thing. We're still disagreeing, but getting the law involved, getting death penalty involved, getting fines and jail time and all that just because we don't agree is sad. But we see this all the way back in the Bible days. So, like I say, I want you to just to think about this, and what we see today is nothing new. It's been around since then, and the sad thing about it is it's gonna get worse. There's countries that it's like this, China, different countries like that are against Christianity. They're bad. You go to jail, you go to prison, whatever. So thankfully we're not like that in the United States, but it's coming. Jesus said you will be persecuted. So if you're not being persecuted, be ready to be persecuted. If you're not being persecuted, maybe you're not living like Paul. Because if you're living the Christian life, Jesus didn't say you might be persecuted. He said you will be persecuted. So anyway, that's the message for Sunday morning. We'll probably be looking at 26 Sunday night, and because we don't have much of Acts left, and that's why I wanted to kind of finish the story here about Paul, to kind of keep us fresh on what's going on there. All right, guys. See you when I see you. Love you all, and just be safe. Keep yourself sane in this time of containment, and hope to see you guys soon.